You think you know how you'd survive a zombie apocalypse. You've seen the movies, you've played the games, maybe you've even mapped out your escape route in your head while stuck in traffic. But here's the truth. Almost everything you think you know about surviving the undead is wrong. Not just a little wrong, catastrophically, hilariously, fatally wrong. Because when the simulation runs, when the numbers are crunched, and when the science of survival collides with the chaos of a world gone feral, the real story isn't about chainsaws or shotguns. It's about biology, physics, psychology, and the brutal math of human desperation. So let's rip the bandage off. If the dead started walking tomorrow, what would actually happen? And more importantly, what would you have to do to survive? First, let's get one thing straight. The zombies aren't your biggest problem. Not at first. The real enemy is time. The moment the outbreak begins, a clock starts ticking, a countdown to the collapse of everything you take for granted. Water, power, medicine, trust. The simulation shows that within 72 hours, the world's supply chains grind to a halt. Grocery shelves are stripped bare, gas stations run dry, and the illusion of order evaporates. You're not fighting monsters, you're fighting entropy, panic, and the slow, grinding hunger that turns neighbors into threats. The first survival insight? Forget the fantasy of lone wolf heroisms. The data is merciless. Solo survivors die first, not because they're weak, but because the world is designed for cooperation. You need a group, even if you hate people. Why? Because sleep is non-negotiable. Try staying awake for 72 hours straight, and your brain will betray you. Hallucinations, paranoia, microsleeps. In a world where one bite means death, nodding off alone is a death sentence. The simulation reveals that groups of 4 to 6 have the highest survival rates. Big enough to share watch shifts, small enough to stay mobile and avoid detection. This isn't about friendship, it's about biology. Humans are pack animals, and in the apocalypse, the pack is your only shield against the night. But let's talk about the zombies themselves. The simulation doesn't care about Hollywood rules. It runs on biology, epidemiology, and the physics of decay. The average human body, once dead, begins to break down within hours. Rigor mortis sets in, muscles stiffen, and within days, decomposition turns flesh to soup. So unless your zombies are supernatural, you're not facing an army of tireless, immortal predators. You're facing a horde of rapidly rotting, increasingly fragile corpses. The real danger isn't their strength, it's their numbers, and the way panic amplifies their threat. In the first week, the simulation shows, most casualties come not from bites, but from stampedes, accidents, and the chaos of mass flight. People trample each other in stairwells, crash cars in panicked escapes, and die of dehydration while hiding in locked rooms. The lesson? Your best weapon isn't a gun, it's a plan. Know your exits, avoid crowds, move early, before the herd forms. This works because the first wave of panic is always the deadliest. If you wait, you're just another body in the pile. Now let's get practical. Water. You can live 3 weeks without food, but only 3 days without water. And in a world where the taps run dry, every drop becomes precious. The simulation models urban water systems, and the results are grim. Within 48 hours of a blackout, water pressure collapses. Toilets stop flushing, faucets cough out air, and the city's reservoirs become breeding grounds for bacteria. So what do? You harvest water before the grid fails. Fill every container you can find. Bathtubs, sinks, pots, even trash cans lined with clean plastic bags. This isn't paranoia, it's physics. Water weighs 8 pounds per gallon, and you need at least a gallon per person per day. Rainwater collection is your next line of defense. Rig up tarps, gutters, or even plastic sheeting to funnel rain into clean containers. And always, always purify. Boil for at least 1 minute or use unscented household bleach, 8 drops per gallon. Stir, wait 30 minutes. This works because most pathogens can't survive heat or chlorine, but your stomach can't survive dysentery. In the apocalypse, diarrhea kills more people than zombies ever will. Food is next, but here's the ugly truth. You're not going to be hunting deer in Central Park or growing tomatoes on your windowsill. The simulation shows that urban environments become food deserts within days. The average city has just 3 days worth of food on the shelves, and once that's gone, it's gone. So you scavenge, but you do it smart. Ignore the obvious targets: supermarkets, convenience stores, big box retailers. Those are looted first, and the risk isn't worth the reward. Instead, think like a rat. Hit places people forget. Office vending machines, hotel minibars, hospital cafeterias, even pet stores. Dry kibble isn't gourmet, but it's calories, and in the apocalypse, calories are currency. This section is based on practical field survival experience, rather than formal academic sources. But calories alone won't save you. The simulation reveals a brutal pattern. As the days drag on, the real killer is not starvation, but malnutrition. Vitamin C vanishes first, and with it comes scurvy, bleeding gums, weakness, slow death. So you prioritize foods that last. Canned fruit, multivitamins, even those little packets of hot sauce and ketchup. Anything with ascorbic acid is gold. And if you're desperate, pine needles steeped in hot water make a crude but effective tea loaded with vitamin C. This works because conifer needles contain ascorbic acid, and boiling them extracts enough to stave off deficiency. It's not tasty, but it's survival. Now let's talk about movement. The movies love to show survivors sprinting through empty streets, but the simulation says otherwise. Movement is risk. Every step outside your shelter is a roll of the dice. Exposure, injury, detection. The most successful survivors move rarely and only with purpose. Daytime is safer than night, not because zombies can't see in the dark, but because you can. Human night vision is terrible, and one twisted ankle can end your story. So you move at dawn, when the light is low but visibility is good. You avoid main roads, stick to alleys, and never ever travel alone. This works because the fewer variables you introduce, the fewer things can go wrong. And in the apocalypse, wrong is usually fatal. Shelter is your next priority, but not all shelters are created equal. The simulation models thousands of hiding spots, from suburban basements to high-rise rooftops. The best shelters share three traits: concealment, defensibility, and escape routes. Basements are tempting, but they're death traps if you get cornered. Rooftops offer visibility, but you're exposed to the elements and have nowhere to run. The sweet spot is second or third floors, with multiple exits, windows, fire escapes, even rope ladders. You want to be high enough to avoid ground-level threats, but not so high you can't escape if the building is overrun. This works because zombies, like water, follow the path of least resistance. Make your shelter harder to reach, and you buy yourself time. But never get complacent. The simulation shows that the most dangerous threat isn't the horde outside, it's the people inside. Cabin fever, paranoia, and the slow erosion of trust turn safe havens into powder kegs. Set ground rules early. No weapons inside, shared chores, rotating watch shifts. This section is based on practical field survival experience. Let's address the elephant in the room: weapons. Everyone wants to be the hero with the shotgun, but the simulation is merciless. Guns are loud, heavy, and attract attention. Every shot is a beacon drawing the hungry and the desperate. Ammunition runs out fast, and cleaning a jammed weapon in the dark is a recipe for disaster. The best weapons are melee weapons: crowbars, axes, or even sturdy sticks. Not because they're glamorous, but because they don't run out of ammo, and they double as tools. The best weapon is the one you can use without thinking, even when you're exhausted and terrified. This works because muscle memory is faster than panic, and in a world where hesitation means death, simplicity wins. Now, let's get real. You're not going to fight your way through the apocalypse. The simulation shows that avoidance is 10 times more effective than confrontation. Stealth, patience, and the ability to disappear are your greatest assets. Learn to move quietly. Soft-soled shoes, slow steps, no jangling gear. Tape down loose straps, pad your pockets, and never carry more than you can run with. This section is based on practical field survival experience. Now, the ugly truth about infection. The simulation doesn't care about plot armor. One bite, one scratch, and you're done. But it's not just a zombie virus you have to worry about. In a world without antibiotics, even a minor cut can turn septic. So you prioritize hygiene. Boil your water, wash your hands, and treat every wound like it's life or death. Stockpile soap, alcohol wipes, and bandages. If you run out, improvise. Clean cloth, boiled water, even honey, which has natural antibacterial properties. This works because infection is the silent killer, and in the apocalypse, there's no second chance. Let's talk about fire. It's your friend and your enemy. Fire cooks food, purifies water, and keeps you warm. But it also gives away your position. The simulation shows that most survivors who die in the first month do so because of exposure, hypothermia, dehydration, or heat stroke. So you learn to build small, smokeless fires, use dry twigs, pine needles, or even a soda can and chocolate bar to start a flame. Build a Dakota fire hole, a small pit with a side vent to keep the fire hidden and the smoke minimal. This works because the earth insulates the heat and the vent draws air, making the fire burn hotter and cleaner. But always be ready to douse it and move. In the apocalypse, comfort is a luxury you can't afford. Now, the psychological game. The simulation is brutal here. Most survivors don't die from zombies or starvation. They die from despair. Isolation, fear, and the relentless grind of survival erode your will to live. So you build routines. You set small goals. Find water. Patch a window. Teach someone to tie a knot. You tell stories. Sing songs, even if your voice shakes. This works because the human brain craves meaning, and in the absence of hope, it invents reasons to keep going. The survivors who last aren't the strongest or the smartest. They're the ones who refuse to give up, even when the world is falling apart. But let's not sugarcoat it. The simulation is clear. Most people don't make it. The first month is a meat grinder. The old, the sick, the unprepared, they're the first to go. But even the fit and the clever fall to bad luck, bad choices, or just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. So you stack the odds in your favor. You prepare, not just with gear, but with knowledge. You learn first aid, basic mechanics, and how to read a map. You practice tying knots, starting fires, and purifying water. This works because in the apocalypse, every skill is a weapon, and ignorance is fatal. Now, let's talk about mobility. The simulation shows that cars are a trap. Roads clog with abandoned vehicles, and gas goes stale within months. Bicycles, on the other hand, are gold. Silent, efficient, and able to navigate around obstacles. You can carry more than you can on foot, and you don't need fuel. This works because human legs are the most reliable engine in the world, and in the apocalypse, reliability is everything. But what about the long game? The simulation doesn't end after a month. If you make it past the initial die-off, you face a new set of challenges. The dead decay, but so does civilization. Medicine runs out, tools break, and the seasons turn. Winter is the great equalizer. Without heat, even the strongest freeze. So you learn to insulate, layer clothing, seal windows, and build windbreaks. You scavenge for blankets, sleeping bags, even newspapers to stuff in your clothes. This works because heat loss is your enemy, and every degree you save is a day you live. And then there's the question of community. The simulation is ruthless here. Lone survivors fade away. But groups that cooperate, share resources, and enforce rules endure. You build alliances, trade skills, and resolve conflicts before they explode. You set boundaries. No stealing, no violence, no secrets. This works because trust is the glue that holds civilization together, even in the ruins. But let's not forget the wild card: other survivors. The simulation shows that as resources dwindle, the greatest threat isn't the undead, it's the living. Desperation breeds violence, and the line between friend and foe blurs. So you stay alert. You avoid large groups, keep your supplies hidden, and never reveal your full hand. You negotiate from a position of strength, but you're always ready to walk away. This section is based on practical field survival experience rather than formal academic sources. Now, the final truth. The simulation doesn't offer happy endings. There's no cavalry, no miracle cure, no reset button. Survival is ugly, exhausting, and often pointless. But it's also human. The will to live, to protect, to rebuild, that's what endures. The real secret isn't in the weapons or the gear, it's in the choices you make, the people you trust, and the knowledge you carry. The apocalypse strips away the illusions, but it also reveals the core of what it means to be alive. So if the dead rise tomorrow, forget the fantasy. Don't wait for a hero, don't trust the movies. Trust the science.
trust your instincts, and above all, trust the people who stand beside you. Because in the end, the truth about survival isn't about beating the zombies, it's about beating the odds, one day at a time. You're still here. That means you're one of the rare ones, the ones who don't flinch when the world gets ugly, who want the whole truth, not just the highlight reel. So let's keep going, deeper into the simulation, past the first month, into the long, grinding aftermath where the real test of survival begins. Because if you've made it this far, you're not just surviving the zombies, you're surviving the collapse of everything you ever called normal. Let's talk about the slow-motion disaster of infrastructure decay. In the movies, the world falls apart overnight, but in reality, it's a slow, relentless unraveling. The simulation models what happens when maintenance stops, when no one is left to fix the water mains, patch the roads, or keep the power lines humming. Within weeks, the grid is a memory. Cell towers go dark, batteries die, and the digital world flickers out. You're left with silence, darkness, and the cold comfort of your own heartbeat. Here's what nobody tells you. The darkness isn't just inconvenient, it's a predator. Without light, your world shrinks to the reach of your hand. Your sense of time warps, your mind starts to play tricks. So you adapt. You hoard candles, lighters, matches, anything that can push back the night. You learn to make improvised lamps from cooking oil and strips of cloth. You ration your light, using it only when necessary, because every flicker is a signal, every glow a beacon for the desperate and the damned. This works because in the absence of electricity, fire becomes your lifeline, your clock, your shield against the abyss. But the collapse of infrastructure brings another subtler threat: disease. The simulation is merciless here. Without sanitation, the world becomes a petri dish. Trash piles up, rats multiply, and insects swarm. Mosquitoes breed in stagnant water, spreading malaria and West Nile. Flies lay eggs in wounds and food. The old enemies, cholera, typhoid, dysentery, return with a vengeance. So you become a fanatic about cleanliness. You bury your waste, far from your shelter and water source. You boil everything, water, rags, even your own clothes if you have to. You cover wounds, burn trash, and keep your living space as clean as possible. This works because in the apocalypse, hygiene isn't a luxury. It's the thin line between life and a slow, miserable death. Now let's get into the psychological of long-term survival. The simulation tracks not just bodies, but minds. It shows that after the initial shock, survivors face a new enemy: monotony. The endless repetition of fear, hunger, and uncertainty grinds people down. Days blur together, motivation fades. People stop caring, stop trying, and eventually stop surviving. So you fight back with structure. You create routines: morning checks, evening patrols, daily chores. You set small goals: find water, patch a hole, teach someone to tie a knot. You tell stories, sing songs, even if your voice shakes. This works because the human brain craves meaning, and in the absence of hope, it invents reasons to keep going. The survivors who last aren't the strongest or the smartest. They're the ones who refuse to give up, even when the world is falling apart.
Grief is a weight, but it's also a weapon. It reminds you what you're fighting for. It keeps you human when everything else tries to turn you into an animal. So you honor the dead in whatever way you can. A story, a song, a moment of silence. This works because memory is resistance. It's how you hold on to yourself, even as the world falls apart. Now, let's talk about adaptation. The simulation shows that the survivors who last aren't the ones who cling to the old world, but the ones who reinvent themselves. You learn new skills, take on new roles. Maybe you were an accountant, a barista, a student. Now you're a medic, a mechanic, a leader. You learn to fix what breaks, to improvise with what you have. You become a scavenger, a gardener, a teacher. This works because the apocalypse is a crucible. It burns away the unnecessary, leaving only what's essential. Adapt or die. It's not just a slogan, it's the law of the new world. Let's get specific about one of the most overlooked survival techniques: foraging. The simulation models urban and rural environments, and the results are surprising. In cities, edible plants grow in the cracks. Dandelions, purslane, wild onions. In the suburbs, fruit trees and berry bushes go unharvested. In the countryside, the world is a pantry, if you know what to look for. You learn to identify edible plants, to avoid the poisonous lookalikes. You harvest in the early morning, when plants are most hydrated. You cook what you can, to kill parasites and soften tough fibers. But foraging alone won't feed a group. The simulation shows that the most successful survivors eventually form small, semi-permanent communities. They pool resources, share skills, and, most importantly, start to produce food. Gardens spring up in vacant lots, rooftops, and backyards. Chickens and rabbits are raised for eggs and meat. Rainwater is collected and filtered. It's not easy, and it's not quick, but it's the only way to outlast the collapse. This works because self-sufficiency is the antidote to scarcity. The more you can produce, the less you have to risk scavenging. The more you share, the stronger your group becomes. But with community comes conflict. The simulation is clear. Rules are essential. Without them, groups fracture, trust erodes, and violence erupts. So you establish a code. Clear, simple, and enforced. No theft, no violence. Share the work, share the risk, share the reward. Disputes are settled by consensus or by a trusted leader. Punishments are fair but swift. This works because order is fragile and chaos is always waiting. The groups that survive are the ones that police themselves, that put the good of the many above the pride of the few. Now, let's talk about defense. The zombies may be rotting, but the living are getting desperate. The simulation shows that as resources dwindle, raids become more common. So you fortify your shelter. You reinforce doors and windows with furniture, boards, even sandbags. You set up noise traps, cans on strings, broken glass, anything that gives you warning. You keep a low profile. No fires at night, no shouting, no visible lights. You rotate watch shifts, and you always have an escape plan. This works because deterrence is more effective than confrontation. Make your shelter look like more trouble than it's worth, and most threats will move on. But sometimes confrontation is unavoidable. The simulation is blunt. Violence is a last resort, but you must be ready. You train with your weapons, whatever they are. You practice drills, how to fall back, how to regroup, how to treat wounds. You never fight fair. You use surprise, numbers, and the environment to your advantage. This works because in the apocalypse, there are no rules except survival. But remember, every fight is a risk. The best victory is the one you never have to win. Let's not forget about information. In the early days, rumors and misinformation are as deadly as any bite. The simulation shows that survivors who stay informed, who listen, observe, and verify, make better decisions. You use radios if you have them. You watch the skies for smoke, listen for distant gunfire, track the movement of herds and people. You share information with trusted allies, but you're careful about what you reveal. This works because knowledge is power, and in the apocalypse, power is survival. Now, the long-term threat, mental health. The simulation is unflinching. Trauma accumulates. Nightmares, anxiety, depression, they're as real as hunger and thirst. So you take care of your mind as well as your body. You talk, even when it hurts. You find moments of beauty, a sunrise, a bird song, a joke shared in the dark. You remember what it means to be human. This works because resilience isn't just physical, it's emotional, spiritual, communal. The survivors who last are the ones who find reasons to laugh, to hope, to love, even when the world gives them every reason not to. But let's get back to the zombies, because after all, they're the reason you're here. The simulation models their decay, their movement, their behavior. Over time, the threat changes. The fast, fresh zombies slow down as their muscles rot. The horde thins as bodies break down, get trapped, or simply fall apart. But the danger never disappears. Even a single zombie is a mortal threat if you get careless, so you never let your guard down. You treat every corpse as a potential enemy. You clear your perimeter regularly, burn or bury the dead, and never assume the threat is gone. This works because complacency is the real killer. The moment you relax, the world reminds you why you can't. Now, the final, uncomfortable truth.
The simulation doesn't end. There's no finish line, no credits rolling, no triumphant return to normal. Survival is a process, not a destination. It's 1,000 small choices, every day, every hour. It's the willingness to adapt, to endure, to find meaning in the ruins. The real secret isn't in the weapons, the gear, or even the group. It's in the stubborn refusal to give up, to let the world win. It's in the quiet moments, sharing a meal, telling a story, watching the stars, that you remember why you fight. So, if you want to survive the zombie apocalypse, forget the fantasy. Forget the heroics. Trust the science, trust your instincts, and above all, trust the people who stand beside you. Because in the end, the truth about survival isn't about beating the zombies. It's about beating the odds, one day at a time, together. And if you're still listening, if you're still planning, still hoping, then maybe, just maybe, you're already one of the survivors.